Lying on the bed, the girl with red hair did not understand why the guy suddenly became like this. Slowly turning into a huge furry animal, the blonde loomed over the girl. She was surprised by this event, because everything had been fine before. After the girl blinked, the blonde man turned into a huge monster. In their world, there were many different kinds of necks. Some were thin, some were strong, some were old, some were young. Sitting in the car, the girl dreamed of putting on collars and forcing people to obey. Looking at her reflection in the glass, the girl didn't know what it looked like. The car door clicked, and a girl stepped out. Hannah was the founder of the jewelry company, Julu. The guys, with forced smiles, told him that a new hottie had arrived at their establishment. Hannah coolly asked him to let her pass. The blonde explained that he was still confident in his beauty and asked her not to be so cold. His partner asked him not to say anything unnecessary. The girl was a frequent guest of their top man, Wang Shun. The blonde man took her purse and greeted her. Wang Shun was the #1 hostess. The guy was 22 years old. Their establishment was designed for women, where they could comfortably drink and chat. The blonde man claimed he expected the lady to come to him on a weekday. He asked if she was busy with work at the company. Looking down, Hannah explained that her blind date had gone wrong again. Wang Shun inquired if the girl had been properly prepared. The red-haired girl explained that the other party had noticed she had treated him like a dog. The brown-haired man asked Hannah if he looked like her dog. The guy asked why she went on a blind date if she didn't know her place. The brown-haired man turned around and explained that a woman like her would probably die completely alone. Hannah asked what kind of place she was supposed to understand. Hannah asked what kind of place was needed for a date. The girl didn't understand why everyone kept dumping her after just a few dates. The blonde man asked why Miss had to go on a blind date. Wang Shunya asked if it was bad to love freely. The girl explained that she hadn't had the opportunity to fall in love freely. Miss came to the club to learn how to communicate with men. Hannah explained that he was unaware of her family's situation. The girl insisted she wanted to find someone similar to herself so she could work with peace of mind. The blonde man asked if she would be happy under such circumstances. Hannah replied coldly that it didn't really matter. She realized she'd never loved anyone, even as a child. She abruptly buried her face in the table. Hannah assumed she had some kind of psychological disorder that made her unattractive to men. The girl didn't know what to do. The hostess hesitated a bit before offering his assistance. The girl, slightly emboldened, asked if he was serious. Hannah asked the blonde man to extend his hand. The guy couldn't understand her actions, but he complied with her request anyway. The guest said she needed a hand. The hostess turned his hand and extended it to the girl. Hannah smiled, noting that he had done everything correctly. The girl pressed hard on his palm. The guy's face twisted, and he said it hurt. Wang Shun asked the miss if she had any sadistic tendencies. The hostess noted that she often played pranks. The girl realized she'd pressed too hard and apologized. Hannah noted that things like this were best done consensually. The guest encouraged the guy to speak up if he felt uncomfortable. Smiling, the blonde man explained that making the guests happy was his job. He gently took her hand and explained that if it helped her relax, she could continue. Another girl waved and asked Wang Shun to come over. The blue-eyed girl said she had ordered an expensive drink for him. Having explained that he would have to move to another table, the blonde man promised to return soon. Hannah asked him to order a bottle of wine for her too. She understood that flirtatious women had much better luck. She realized that even relationships could be bought with money. The girl drank some more vodka. Despite knowing the rules, Hannah still felt no envy. She couldn't understand why she felt disgusted by her own indifferent and cold self. The hostess carried the girl into the bedroom and gently laid her on the snow-white sheets. The guest explained that she was very thirsty. Wang Shun asked the girl to remain still and promised to bring her some. The hostess reported that the woman had been drinking a bit too much and was staying at a regular hotel. The man asked her to get some rest and promised to leave as soon as possible. Hugging the blonde, Hannah asked him not to leave. Unable to hold on to the glass, Wang Shun spilled water on the bed, drenching the girl. Hannah asked him not to leave. The hostess, blushing, said he had a special day and needed to leave. The girl was surprised, knowing that women had special days, but she'd never heard of men having one. Holding the guy tightly, Hannah explained that it was hard to deceive her. The hostess begged her to let him go. Drunk, The girl hugged him tightly and explained that she wouldn't let him go. The businesswoman noticed he was very warm. Wang Xun realized things were getting out of hand. Taking off his uniform, the young man explained his apologies. The blonde man tried to quickly leave the room. Hannah couldn't understand how he could be so hot. She held his uniform in her hands. She realized she truly had no experience with the opposite sex. Hannah knew that even if she started flirting, she still couldn't keep a man. She noticed that the blonde man's neck was very beautiful. The girl excitedly noticed that the blonde boy had very cute ears. Wang Xun realized that the transformation had begun prematurely. Covering the first signs of transformation, the boy asked if a person could have animal ears. The hostess claimed the alcohol was making her see things. Smiling, the guest explained that once she touched him, everything would become clear. The guy begged her not to. The drunk girl tripped and began to fall. The blonde instantly rushed forward to prevent her from getting hurt. Wang Xun fell onto the bed with the girl. The guy hung over her, bare-chested. Hannah noticed the guy's eyes were like those of a wild animal. Blue flames engulfed the hostess. His clothes began to rip. The blonde explained that he was very sorry, but he couldn't take it anymore. The boy's body began to rapidly change, transforming the sweet young man into a huge beast. Wang Xun asked not to look at him. Hannah asked the boy what had happened to him. Massive paws pinned the girl to the bed. The monster begged the businesswoman not to move. Hannah couldn't believe her eyes. She couldn't understand how a human could turn into an animal. Smiling nervously, the girl asked if the gentleman was sane. The snow-white animal insisted he meant no harm and asked her not to call the police. Hannah insisted that everything was fine and she was completely calm. Running her hand through his snow-white fur, she asked why Mr. had become so fluffy. Instead of the expected fear, the businesswoman became extremely delighted. When Hannah was little, she had trouble breathing at home. She would climb over the high wall of a nearby orphanage. The girl knew a grimy puppy was waiting for her behind the wall. The little girl played and amused herself with him, happily sharing happy moments. The girl asked why Mr. Wang had become so fluffy and soft. Embarrassed, Wang Xun insisted he'd always been fluffy. He hoped that when Hannah slept, everything would return to normal when she woke up the next day. The hostess was surprised that the girl didn't want to run away when she saw the monster. Hannah explained that if it really was a dream, then it wasn't surprising she saw a puppy. The businesswoman insisted that if this really was a dream, she could do whatever she wanted. The girl delightedly stroked the soft fur. Hannah gently stroked the creature's ear, explaining that she'd long wanted to see them up close. The blonde asked her not to touch his ears. Wang Xun insisted that his newly transformed body was still very sensitive. The girl noticed that his ears looked very appetizing. Hannah gently bit the soft ear. The businesswoman parted his jaws, noticing that his teeth seemed very sharp. She asked if she could look at his mouth. Despite the unpleasantness of the situation, the mutant didn't dare use force. Hannah noticed that the jaw structure was indeed different from a human's. Wang Xun had poor control over his strength and was afraid of harming his client. Gently stroking his fur, the girl noticed how cute he was. She kissed the werewolf on the nose, noting that the dog really was better than the human. Clenching his jaw tightly, the hostess asked her not to kiss him. The man covered her mouth, explaining that kissing should only be done with someone you love. He tried to convince her that it wasn't worth it. The rays of the morning sun awakened Hannah. Trying to sober up, she realized she remembered practically nothing. The businesswoman remembered getting drunk at the hostess bar the previous night and Mr. Wang walking her home. Hannah tried to compose herself, assuming her memories were just a hallucination. She understood that a person couldn't suddenly become an animal. The businesswoman knew she shouldn't make such a big deal out of it. Hannah called the establishment and said she wanted to set up a meeting with Wang Xun for that evening. The businesswoman decided to meet with the man first and then gather evidence. The hostess club apologized, explaining that the man was on vacation and would be unable to accommodate guests. Hannah asked when the guy usually went to work. The establishment informed her that the guy's situation was unusual. The manager informed her that Mr. Wang had 2 days off. She then asked if she should schedule the client for the day after tomorrow. Hannah realized the situation was truly difficult. The events shift to the blonde man's apartment. The pain caused him to transform into something between a human and an animal. The mutant's body was engulfed in blue flames. The animal within wanted to break free. Wang Xun looked at the framed photograph of the girl. The events jumped forward a few days. It was 7 in the evening. Someone asked Hannah on the phone why she had broken up with her potential suitor. The girl insisted that there was no one better than the Li family's young master. Mama asked how she could still be dissatisfied. Hannah calmly replied that she was dissatisfied. The businesswoman explained that the other woman had dumped her. The woman noted that it had nothing to do with the guy. Nestle told her mother that the girl had no interest in Xiao Li. His mother scolded her for taking the initiative. She didn't ask how he was doing every day. The woman sternly reminded him that boys preferred caring girls. With a heavy sigh, Hannah explained that she did indeed wake up early every day to say hello and reply to all the messages on WeChat. The businesswoman explained that she couldn't do anything if someone thought she was being too cold. The woman sternly remarked that her daughter simply didn't know how to communicate. Her mother scolded her, saying she'd die of boredom, as she'd be 30 in a few years. The woman sternly reminded her daughter that her expiration date was soon running out, and she'd be an old maid. Entering the office, the brunette whispered to them for a drink to celebrate the end of the workday. Bai Xiaoshan was Hannah's secretary and best friend. The mother explained that if the girl didn't bring Mr. Li back, she didn't have to come home. The brunette asked if her mother had manipulated her friend again. The girl asked her friend if she'd gone to a hostess bar to learn how to get along with men. Xiaoshan asked if the situation had improved. Hannah shared that she'd been wanting to learn more about something lately. She explained that she wouldn't be drinking on Friday night. The red-haired man asked where the top host, Wang Xun, had been. He noted that he hadn't seen the blonde man for the past few days. Lighting a cigarette, the blonde man explained that Wang Xun's work schedule was flexible. The red-haired man remarked that it was very nice to be a favorite. He noticed that the blonde man was sitting too far from the guests, and this was an indicator of unprofessionalism. The guy insisted it was his own unique style. The blonde explained that many clients liked this cool guy. The guy insisted he was new and had a lot to learn. The guy with the red hair asked if the reason why stupid women came to their bar was to be treated like they were important people. The red-haired guy noticed that the best hostess was feigning coldness, even though he was supposed to be courting people. The guy noticed that he was feigning innocence like a whore. Wang Xun loomed over the boy, piercing him with his amber eyes. The highly nervous newcomer was surprised when the best tail approached him. The blonde asked if he could borrow some perfume from Xiao Xin. The blonde agreed and noticed that Hannah had arrived. The newbie whispered that the young rich woman had made the blonde man #1 in their establishment. The boys consoled themselves that the blonde had found a good sponsor, and that was why he had climbed so quickly. Wang Xun listened attentively to the boys' conversation. Looking down, the guy assumed it was true. His colleagues had discussed how the blonde was indifferent to everyone, but always prepared himself the most when he received Miss Han. Wang Xun knew that he had been born with a body different from that of ordinary people. He doubted he could consider himself human. The blonde man couldn't pass the medical exam to enroll in school or find a stable job. As a result, he was only able to secure a job at this institution. From the very first day, the blonde man was despised for his ability to seduce women without saying a word. One of his tormentors suggested hitting Wang Xun a few more times. The boy understood that the owner wouldn't tolerate trouble and had no intention of causing a scene, so he restrained himself as best he could. The red-haired guy noted that if he didn't hurt his face, he would still be able to come to work. One of the employees claimed the blonde man was stealing customers and deserved it. The guy poured a can of soda over the newbie's head. The blonde man knew that if he retaliated, he wouldn't be able to control himself. Approaching the boys, Hannah asked where the restroom was. Growing increasingly nervous, the red-haired man explained that the restroom was in the next hallway and offered to take her there. The employee was convinced it was a staff lounge and that customers were not allowed in. The customer apologized and asked to be escorted by the blonde man. The manager explained to the young man that his guest had already arrived. He promised to be with him in a few minutes. The red-haired man wished Wang Xun all the best. The blonde realized he'd flashed back to the past. He was incredibly nervous, as Hannah had seen him transform into a beast. The hostess was surprised the girl had dared to come back. Smiling and waving, the businesswoman called the guy Mr. Fluffy Ears. She then remarked that they hadn't seen each other for quite some time. The blonde Pomerchev insisted that it was just a dream and suggested they sit down. Hannah suggested finding a more private place. She cautioned that it would be better if strangers couldn't overhear their conversation. The blonde froze. Wang Xun offered his guest a seat and something to drink. The hostess suspected the girl didn't believe it was a dream. After all, her attitude was different from her usual one. She explained that drinking might interfere with their relationship. The guy felt a warm feeling inside. Hannah asked for a glass of orange juice and something to eat. The blonde man anxiously asked if she'd had lunch. She shared that she'd come to the club as soon as work had finished. Hannah suggested fried chicken. The businesswoman explained that she was afraid the guy would suddenly disappear again. The guy, looking down, explained that there was no other place where people like him could work. Hannah asked if he had enough to live on. The blonde man insisted he wanted to earn enough for early retirement. Laughing, the girl asked how old he was, guessing he was in his early 20s. Wang Shunya asked this girl not to drink the drink, as it was very cold. The hostess asked the girl to wait a few seconds. Handing over a small box of sandwiches, the blonde man recommended they eat them first. The hostess insisted that vegetable and ham sandwiches weren't on the menu. Wang Shunya insisted he'd prepared them for himself for dinner. The young man noticed the booth was quite far away and didn't attract attention. The hostess asked the girl to eat as soon as possible. Hannah asked if he was so kind to all his guests. The blonde froze, explaining that it was simply professionalism. Wang Shunya noticed that the guest looked a little upset. The girl, with a sad look, realized that this was all she needed. And then the businesswoman offered the host a deal. Hannah claimed she believed that the more she interacted with men, the faster she would learn to communicate with them. She claimed that love isn't easy and shared that she'd been dumped again. Hannah explained that she needed a guy to help shut her family's mouth. She handed over a contract with the terms of the employment contract for the fake guy. The businesswoman suggested that everyone get what they wanted. After a slight hesitation, Wang Shun asked if the girl wanted him to pretend to be her boyfriend. The businesswoman assumed it would be an easy job for a professional. Hannah was confident that love could be shown to anyone, anytime. The guy, squeezing her hands tightly, asked why the girl had chosen him. Laughing, Hannah explained that she liked fluffy ears. The businesswoman had already found several pieces of evidence. The girl explained that if the contract was signed, she wouldn't tell anyone about the beast. Hannah understood that if he didn't agree to the contract, she'd be left to resort to all sorts of begging. The guest explained that the guy wouldn't have to hide his transformation from her. Hannah lifted his sleeve and bit his shoulder. The blonde explained that it hurt. The businesswoman explained that everything depended on the guy's consent. Hannah assured him that if he wasn't interested in the contract, she wouldn't bother him anymore. The blonde man asked again if she would accept a refusal. Looking down, the girl explained that being intrusive was rather rude. The businesswoman offered to add her number to the guy. Hannah assured him that if he wanted to sign the contract, he could always contact her at any time. Wang Shunya explained that there was no need. Smiling, the girl reminded him that the blonde man was number 1 and his hourly rate was very high. The blonde man snatched the papers from the girl's hands and insisted he was ready to sign them right then and there. Wang Shunya, looking into the girl's eyes, assured that he did not need time to think and that he was ready to sign the paper right now. Soon, the girl and the hostess were sitting at the hotel. The businesswoman was surprised that the guy used his real name. Hannah was surprised that the guy agreed so quickly. She guessed he genuinely needed the money. The businesswoman realized the guy was 2 years younger than her. Hannah thought there was no generation gap between them. After checking the contract, the woman explained that she would pay the blonde man hourly. The businesswoman explained that they were to come to her home after work and treat him as if he were her girlfriend. Hannah asked the guy to introduce her to a loving atmosphere. Wang Shunya explained that he was willing to visit her in the mornings. The blonde explained that the establishment was usually open from 4 in the afternoon until midnight. The girl explained that she herself had to go to work during the day, but she had free time in the evening. Hannah suggested that the only suitable time was a day off for both of them. The woman suggested meeting in the morning on her day off, and he would go to work as usual that evening. The businesswoman suggested he wait until she finished work so he could have dinner on his day off. Wang Shunya said he only had to take days off during his transformation. The blonde insisted that on those days, he felt more like a monster than a beast. The guy realized that Hannah was truly obsessed with the idea of learning how to be with a man. The events flash forward 3 months. That day, Hannah remarked that if you give the boys money, they'll never get rid of a client. The blonde man asked why she came to that conclusion. The guy explained that if you entered the establishment, any girl would be treated like a princess. Wang Xun assured him that he had never gotten rid of anyone. The blonde man announced that a suitable host would be ready for the girl in a few minutes. The businesswoman asked if she could book him herself. The woman asked if he would be there to receive the guest. Wang Xunya hesitated and explained that he felt awkward. The blonde man asked if girls preferred strong, striking men who looked like princes. The client smiled and explained that this wasn't necessary. Hannah explained that some women prefer to see their boyfriends sick, crying, or completely broken. The girl gently wiped the boy's wounded face. The businesswoman explained that she was one of those girls. Hannah asked if this wasn't too strange for him. The businesswoman insisted that his transformation into a monster was no problem at all. Hannah explained that she herself was not a normal person. The girl insisted that for her, monsters were more preferable than people. The businesswoman admitted that she herself loved a dog as a child. Hannah fondly recalled interacting with the animal while climbing over the shelter fence. She insisted that she liked him best of all. Wang Shun asked him not to make such promises so recklessly. The girl dispelled his doubts that she was not Yegong, the dragon-loving one. Hannah asked the boy if he thought her reaction that night was due to alcohol. The blonde's heart began to pound wildly, trying to escape his chest. Gently running her hand over his face, Hannah informed him that he could transform. To make sure she wasn't afraid at all, the hostess assured him that until the time came, he wouldn't change. The boy's vision suddenly began to blur. The blonde man didn't understand what was happening. Wang Xun didn't know why he couldn't control his body again. Covering his face with his hands, the boy announced that he had to leave. Hannah grabbed the guy's arm abruptly and explained that they hadn't yet discussed much. She didn't understand why he wanted to break the contract so abruptly. Pushing his employer's hand away, the boy suddenly began to transform into an octopus. The blonde's tentacles twitched involuntarily. Hannah tried to run to the boy and help him. The blonde man asked them not to come close to him. The boy couldn't understand why he had suddenly changed. The hostess explained that while transforming into a monster, he retained most of his consciousness. The blonde still inherited some of the animal's habits. Wang Xunya explained that he had transformed into many creatures, but most of them were furry. Trembling all over, the blonde man asked the girl to leave as quickly as possible. The hostess understood that he had never had such a uniform before and couldn't fully adapt to it. The boy pressed on one of his tentacles. Hannah insisted it was nothing serious and promised to keep a safe distance from him. The girl was surprised that he wasn't just transforming into dogs. Hannah asked if there was anything she could do to help. The blonde realized his limbs were dismembered and uncontrollable. Wang Shun asked the girl to protect herself properly. The tentacles slowly wrapped around the girl's legs. The blonde, trying to control his animalistic nature, asked the girl to leave as quickly as possible. The hostess was afraid of hurting Hannah. Taking one of the tentacles in her hand, the girl explained that he shouldn't worry. The businesswoman noted that the tentacles didn't seem hostile to her. Wang Xunya asked the client to remain vigilant. The girl noticed that the tentacles enjoyed being caressed. The blonde explained that he couldn't feel all the nerve endings, and the tentacles were moving in an incomprehensible way. The girl gently pressed on one of the limbs. Hannah promised to stay away if she sensed danger. The businesswoman was confident that even if she abused her new limbs, they would still remain obedient. Wang Xunya was surprised that even after being wrapped around her, she still dared to approach. The young man remarked that his client was quite bold. Hannah commented that the tentacles were just pieces of meat. She worriedly asked if the blonde man's body hurt. He was surprised that she knew he was in pain. The blonde reported that the bones were already shrinking, and he was almost certain that only the lower half of the body had changed. Fortunately, not his entire body was covered in tentacles. The girl asked how long this would last. Wang Xunya reported that under normal conditions, the rotation lasted at least 12 hours. The guy noticed that today's turn had been rather sudden. Hostel explained that he hadn't known how long it would last. The tentacles were slowly beating the girl's legs. The blonde man advised Hannah to go home and rest. Smiling, The businesswoman explained that she had no intention of leaving. The girl explained that it was a wonderful opportunity, perhaps if she could prove it. That even when the guy was in the ranks, they could still date. Hannah insisted that she needed to learn to care for others. She shared that before because of her work. Even when Hannah asked the blonde to forget what he'd just said. The girl, throwing up her hands, explained that in a couple, they needed to take care of each other. The businesswoman explained that if one side invested too little, the training would not be achieved. Hannah said she would go and renew the room lease. The businesswoman advised the guy to lie down for a bit. The tentacles gently wrapped around the girl's legs, as if they didn't want her to leave. Hannah asked the guy to let her go. The blonde muttered that he couldn't do anything and that he should have left earlier. The girl explained that if the tentacles let go of her, they would be able to wrap themselves around her as they wished immediately after her return. Wang Shunya was surprised that she had negotiated with the tentacles. The limbs began to slowly loosen their grip. Hannah was touched, as they resembled small animals. The girl explained that they would be able to wrap themselves around her, twist her, or touch her. The blonde man watched in stupefaction. The tentacles finally released the girl, calmly falling to the floor. Hannah noticed the limbs were quite sociable and thanked them. The businesswoman nonchalantly walked to the phone. The guy couldn't understand why his body, which was usually restless for long periods, suddenly became so docile. The businesswoman asked to change the hourly rental to a daily one. The tentacles settled near the heart-shaped girl. The boy was surprised that he could actually communicate with his new body parts. The blonde ordered the limbs to calm down and remain still. Jerking wildly, they grabbed the boy's hand. Wang Xun realized his attempts were futile. He couldn't understand how Hannah had done it. The girl explained that they had agreed and hung up. The businesswoman assured him that if he wasn't restored by tomorrow, she would extend the number for another day. The girl said she had to work and suggested he go to bed early that evening. He became very nervous when he realized she was planning to stay in the same room with him. While brushing her teeth, the girl announced they needed to book another room. Hannah remembered her promise to the tentacles and couldn't break it. But there was a clause in the contract that completely contradicted her actions. She remembered that the offender was fined a hefty sum. She wondered if Mr. Wang would do anything bad to her. Wrapped in a blanket, the girl fell into a deep sleep after a hard day's work. The blonde was surprised she fell asleep so quickly. The boy noticed that Hannah was still wrapped in his tentacles. Smiling, Wang Xun realized that the girl hadn't changed a bit since childhood. Just like then, 18 years ago, when the girl slept carefree on the soft skin of a white animal. Waking from his nap, the dog realized there was one more person. Hanju was 8 years old at the time. Fluffy asked if the girl was a new experimental specimen. Wang Shunya didn't understand why the girl had come to that zone. Rubbing her eyes, the girl asked again. Looking at the dog with sleepy eyes, Hannah said that she simply climbed over the wall. Fluffy asked how to climb over the super high wall. The little girl was very happy to see a talking dog. Wang Shunya knew it was unacceptable for ordinary people to realize he wasn't an ordinary dog. Quickly realizing this, the fluffy creature began to bark loudly. Hannah was indignant that even if he'd learned to bark, she still wouldn't lose her memory. Upset, the wolf asked why the girl didn't leave quickly. Wang Shunya explained to the uninvited guest that the research institute did not allow outsiders to enter or exit. Fluffy warned her it could be very dangerous if she got caught. Hannah reminded her that the sign outside said it was a child protection institution. The girl shared that she'd run away from home for a while and didn't want to go back yet. The little one approached her new friend with a smile on her face. Fluffy explained that this wasn't right. Wang Xun warned that within these walls were nothing but monsters who required injections and medicine every day. Disappointed, the creature explained that he, too, was a monster. Wang Xun stood up on his hind legs and explained that he would eat the girl. The mutant knew he had to scare her off, afraid she would be examined like him. Hannah gently touched the soft pads of his paws. The wolf couldn't understand what she was doing. Grabbing the furry paw, the girl threw him over her back. Fluffy whined, not understanding why Hannah had acted so suddenly. Hannah held out her hand and explained that she was very strong and no monster could eat her. She assured him that he had no need to worry about anyone harming her. The boy realized that Hannah had lost her memory and become a complete stranger. He was surprised that she had never been afraid of him because of her mutation. But the blonde sadly realized that even back then, in childhood, he had lost the right to be near her again. Sunbeams streamed through the window. When she woke up, the girl couldn't figure out where she was. Looking at the peacefully sleeping blonde, Hannah recalled how they'd stayed at the hotel the night before. After his conversion, the businessman was worried whether the boy had gotten better. The tentacles made a soft popping sound as they revealed a heart shape to the girl. Hannah panicked slightly as she realized she couldn't move. Pulling off the blanket, the girl saw numerous tentacles, some of which had even managed to penetrate her clothes. Hannah suggested they play with them after work. The blonde noticed that the girl had already woken up. Smiling, she assured him that he had woken up just in time. She was in a bit of a quandary. Hannah reported that the tentacles, which had been quite obedient yesterday, did not obey her at all today and were chained to the bed. The guy blushed with shame and realized that the sensation from all the tentacles was transmitted to him. Sliding over the body, the unusual limbs completely wrapped around the girl, pulling her to the sofa. Wang Shunya, trying to hide his emotions, recalled how he warned yesterday that he could not fully control the tentacles. The guy couldn't look at his lover anymore, realizing his body was becoming increasingly restless. Trying to calm down, the blonde explained that the synchronization had been going on all night. Wang Shunya assumed he could discern the movement of each tentacle. He anxiously asked if she could endure it a little longer. Having thanked him, the girl assured him that she could tolerate the antics of his disobedient limbs for a little while longer. The blonde nervously realized his body was slowly adapting. Wang Shun knew they were wrapping around the girl instinctively, and he hoped they were somewhat connected to his thoughts. Slowly releasing the girl, the blonde realized that he could control some of the tentacles. The mutant realized that his many limbs were also parts of his body. He had a strange feeling, as if he were caressing Hannah with many hands. Trying to muster her patience, the girl asked if the mutant had managed to control his tentacles. Hannah was indignant that they were starting to creep into forbidden places. The blonde promised to try to deal with it as quickly as possible. Frightened, the girl wondered how soon it would happen. The businesswoman realized that if they decided to pretend to be lovers, intimacy was inevitable. The girl strongly disliked sensations like being tied up. Something like that was too shameful for her. Wang Shunya was focused, trying to do something. Hannah wasn't sure if she should start a conversation with the tentacles. The businesswoman hesitated, as it could harm Mr. Van. The blonde man happily announced that he had only one last thing left. The hostess realized that all he had to do was connect all the new limbs, and then he would be able to release the girl. The limbs released Hannah, but the last tentacle, which still refused to obey, swung above the girl's head. Hannah became extremely nervous. The blonde man panicked when he realized what his tentacle was doing. He rushed toward the girl and asked her to dodge. Wang Shunya knew that he needed to take control of the body part as quickly as possible. The tentacle gently touched the girl's cheek. Hannah noticed the limb kiss her. Laughing, the businesswoman asked if she should reciprocate. The girl kissed the unruly tentacle. A moment later, the feeling spread to the blonde, causing his heart to pound wildly. The tentacle slowly began to retreat from the girl's fragile body. She asked if Wang Shun had managed to repair his entire body. Hannah noticed that the blonde man had developed legs. The blonde man couldn't understand how this could have happened. The businesswoman explained that this was a significant relief for her. Wang Shunya explained that since he was born, he had never experienced a sudden recovery in the middle of a treatment. The mutant suggested that the sudden transformation and return were directly related to the girl. The blonde man remarked that this was rather odd. Looking down, the hostess admitted that she didn't know why it had all happened. The events shift to the headquarters of the Julu Jewelry Company. The girl wondered how she could have known why. Hannah reassured herself that this was her only tardiness in the last 2 years. She was glad that Mr. Wang went to work in the afternoon, and it didn't affect him at all. Hannah realized there were people in the world capable of shapeshifting. She laughed, thinking it was quite amusing. The brunette whispered to the mistress, explaining that they were in trouble. Hannah asked her friend what had happened. Xiaobai told her that her boss's mother had come to the office that morning. A wild smile appeared on the girl's face when she realized the old woman had been in her office. Hannah asked why she hadn't even mentioned she was coming. The businesswoman asked why she had appeared in her office so suddenly. The brunette explained that branch inspections required sudden appearances. Jianli explained that otherwise she wouldn't have been able to catch the oversleeping CEO. Smiling, Hannah explained that her situation was sudden as her friend had health issues. The woman jumped up and noticed that her daughter had injured her wrist. The brunette asked her daughter to show her her hand. The girl panicked, fearing that these could be marks left by Mr. Wang's tentacles. Angrily, Jianli asked who dared do this to her daughter. Hannah realized the tentacle marks didn't look like they were made by any object. The headmistress realized that her mother might have continued her investigation and called a doctor to examine the injury. Swallowing nervously, she realized that her friend's secret was in grave danger. Hannah explained that she'd recently found a boyfriend and had just tried it with him yesterday. The businesswoman explained that they'd done nothing but tie him up. The girl claimed that after she tried it, she felt a lot of pain and realized that she was still a normal person and immediately stopped. The girl felt it was an incomprehensible sensation to be dominant but feign weakness. The brunette, looking gloomy, asked if what her daughter had said was true. Hannah insisted that every sentence she'd said was true. She explained that, like a normal person, she'd gotten a boyfriend, and she reminded him that her mother no longer needed to rush her. The businesswoman realized that this was a perfect opportunity to put her plan with the fake boyfriend into action. Hannah explained that if her mother still didn't trust her, she could bring the guy over to visit next week. The woman accepted an offer to meet her daughter's boyfriend the following week. The girl asked if she was being overly worried. Hannah claimed they had met not long ago. The red-haired girl was already actively pondering the circumstances under which they had met. Jianli assured her daughter not to worry and handed her an invitation. The woman explained that their family would be hosting a reception the following week. The brunette admitted that she had initially planned to take the girl with her to make amends with Mr. Li. Jianli said she wanted to mend fences between the two families. But the brunette changed her plans because her daughter had a boyfriend. Her mother explained that she wanted to prove Hannah wasn't so bad. Smiling, the brunette remembered what Mrs. Li had said about how good her son was. Jean Li suggested watching to see if he could find a new girlfriend so quickly. Hannah realized that taking a guy along to prove a point was just like her mother's style. The events shift to a hostess club. The girl insisted that the blonde man had to come to the reception because her mother might have become suspicious. Hannah warned him that his plan to pretend to be her boyfriend might pose some challenges. The businesswoman asked if he could accompany her on Wednesday evening. The girl promised to pay triple. Wang Shunya explained that he could do it that evening, but not until the morning. The blonde man reminded her that the girl knew about his requests. The girl realized that the boy had only turned into a wolf that evening in the early morning. Hannah joked about Cinderella's transformation. The businesswoman laughed and explained that most of the receptions were for entertainment purposes. Hannah reassured them that there was generally no need to stay overnight. Looking at her, the guy couldn't understand what she was laughing about. The hostess promised to move the work to an earlier time and come see her. Smiling, Hannah wished him good luck with his work. Hannah said she needed to find time to come see him soon and discuss everything. She warned him that her mother might ask something nonsensical. The mutant suggested amending their agreement. The blonde man asked the girl to remain at the table. Wang Shunya explained that he was willing to play along, but he insisted that before doing so, he had one question. The businesswoman remembered that the host had already disguised himself as a bartender. Hannah was confident he wouldn't have any trouble syncing his personal data. Focusing, he asked her if she wanted to play the role of a couple with him. She answered affirmatively, assuring him that otherwise, she wouldn't be in this club right now. The hostess sighed and decided to be direct. The blonde explained that the lovers didn't call each other Miss and Mr. Wang Shunya explained that they didn't look like a couple at all. The businesswoman herself realized they were more like partners than lovers. Hannah asked if he meant they needed to change their communication style. The hostess, looking very nervous, explained that this was the first thing to do. The blonde man remarked that the feeling of coldness could be explained by the fact that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. The guy shared that the feeling of intimacy was impossible to fake because it was hidden in the little things. Hannah realized that the hostess was truly an emotional expert. The client suggested calling him Van Wu or Guy. The woman remarked that for names with 3 syllables, the last 2 were especially convenient. Hannah asked the gentleman to give her a nickname too. The blonde man paused, looking at the girl with amber eyes. He asked if he needed to give directions. Smiling, the client asked him to do it his way. Pouring the wine, the blonde man suggested calling the girl Xiaoju. Hannah, very nervous, agreed, noting that it was quite simple. She couldn't understand why the boy's face suddenly moved so close. Looking into his amber eyes, the girl remembered that he used to call her that as a child. Hannah remembered playing with a talking dog as a child. The hostess asked if the girl was okay. She insisted she was fine, and that she'd had a sudden migraine. She insisted she remembered a friend from her childhood. Hannah recalled hearing the dog talk. The businesswoman still insisted it was impossible. The hostess explained that if she wasn't feeling well, he could perform a one-finger massage. Hannah was surprised that the blonde man knew how to massage. The guy suggested she lie down more comfortably. The hostess explained that his work in the service industry gave him a wealth of knowledge. Smiling, the client instructed him to do just that. The woman noticed that her fake boyfriend had forgotten their agreement and called her Miss Hannah. Wang Shunya reminded him that he was still at work. The boy awkwardly looked away. The blonde promised to call her that as soon as they were alone. Hannah noticed that no one saw them, and it didn't matter. The client noticed that the blonde man called her by a nickname that reminded her of her childhood. The girl admitted that she felt a slight nostalgia for a few moments. Hannah said that when she was little, she loved to go play in the big yard. While enjoying the massage, the client said she mostly interacted with a very sweet dog. Hannah groaned and asked why he had pressed so suddenly. The girl joked that the knee pad service was excellent. The blonde man suggested his hands were too heavy. After apologizing, the guy promised to massage more gently. Gently massaging her head, the hostess suggested that Hannah had been very popular as a little girl. The blonde man asked why the girl only mentioned the dog. Wang Shunya asked what was so special about the animal. With a heavy sigh, the client explained that she hadn't been popular at all as a child. Hannah complained that as a child, her family cared only about her brother's future. The client admitted that they had been constantly trying to marry her off since childhood, and marry her off by the time she came of age. The mother suggested to the father that they marry off their daughter when she grew up a little and send her off to another family as a bride. The father wondered if the woman's conscience had been eaten away by a dog. Hannah had the feeling that every time her friend wagged his tail and barked, he did it just for her. The young woman shared that the dog was the only creature that could prove her identity had any meaning. The businesswoman explained that this was why she really liked dogs. The guy kept the conversation going with a banal remark. The mutant realized that Hannah's memories had indeed become greatly blurred and distorted. Wang Shunya nostalgically recalled how he talked to the girl when he was still a wolf cub. The blonde was glad that memory had transformed everything into a more reasonable and normal process of communication between man and animal. The boy understood that this was more than enough for her. The mutant understood that under no circumstances could he allow the girl to regain her memory. Events quickly take us to the Lee family's banquet. With a beaming smile, Hannah informed her mother that they had already arrived. The girl held the blonde man's arm. The brunette was surprised by how handsome her daughter's boyfriend was. Hannah reminded him that she'd mentioned him. The girl introduced Wang Shun to her mother. Bowing, he greeted the woman, explaining that he was Xiaoju's boyfriend. Hannah's heart suddenly pounded in her chest. Hannah couldn't understand why Wang Shun was smiling so happily. She felt every beat of her heart. Xiaoju couldn't understand why her heart was pounding. She tried to convince herself that she hadn't slept well in the last few days. She noticed that her daughter's boyfriend was quite handsome and tall. Smiling, Mom remarked that Hannah had excellent taste. Laughing, she noted that the blonde guy's job situation was unclear, but that wasn't a big deal. Hannah interrupted the woman. Jan Lee asked if the couple would like to come over and say hello to Mrs. Lee. Nodding to the women, she explained that she was in the other direction. Pointing to the brunette, Hannah explained that he was her ex-fiancé. The girl explained that he had been her childhood sweetheart during their school days. Looking at the boy, the blonde man asked again. Wang Shunya remembered hearing this from her in the past. That day, Hannah had told him that she had many reasons for always coming to see him. The girl said her father wanted to marry her off to an old man. The schoolgirl complained that she was constantly getting into trouble and being bullied. When her friend asked her in surprise, the girl told her about a strange boy in her class. Hannah couldn't understand why he constantly followed her and called her names. The little girl complained that her hair was pulled and her textbooks were torn. Her classmates noticed that she was so strong that she wasn't even a girl. The wolf cub asked why they treated her like that. The blonde noted that Xiaoju was clearly not a monster and had done nothing wrong. Snuggling into the fur, the girl explained that they simply hated her. Xiao recounted what she'd read in a book, which claimed that people would be hostile to anything that didn't align with their own upbringing. The little girl suggested that her bullies likely thought she was different from ordinary girls. Showing sympathy, the wolf shared that he, too, had been abandoned by his parents because he was born an animal. Incredulous, Hannah asked if Xiao Wu was a human being and not a dog. The annoyed wolf cub explained that there couldn't be talking dogs in the world. The puppy shared that research scientists said that since the meteorite fell, mutant people have appeared on Earth. Xiao Wu explained that their original form was unstable, allowing them to transform into other living or non-living beings. The little girl, her eyes shining, remarked that this was amazing. Hannah asked if he could turn back into a human. The boy, embarrassed, replied yes. The girl asked if she could watch him transform. Xiao Yu said he almost succeeded in transforming into a human. He was very worried that Xiao Zhu wouldn't like him in human form. Seeing the baby's human face, Hannah remarked that it was very cute. Embarrassed, the blonde insisted it wasn't true. Hannah smiled and remarked that he was super cute with his snow-white, silky hair. She remarked that it would be great if he were her childhood sweetheart. Hannah knew the main goal of her evening was to make her mother believe they were in love. She hoped her mother would stop nagging her every day about starting a family. Hannah whispered that the blonde man had no connection with young Master Li. The girl asked him to avoid the brown-haired man. Wang Xunya asked if she wanted to get involved with the brown-haired man. The woman complained that Li was difficult to deal with. Hannah remarked that a brown-haired man would be a real hassle. The client explained that if the blonde man encountered something, she'd be the one to handle it. Master Li poured himself some cognac, approached the couple, and offered to chat. Hannah noticed that their relationship was very delicate. She asked them not to discuss it. Hannah suggested Mr. Li spend more time with his female fans. Shaitan noticed that Hannah kept forgetting that he didn't have any female fans. The guy asked who was with his ex-fiancée. Taking a step forward, the blonde man explained that his identity was not important. Wang Xunya explained that his beloved hadn't yet eaten dinner. The blonde man said they needed to leave Mr. Li's side for a while. Hannah expected her escort to be professional. If she hadn't known beforehand that this was part of the job, she would have thought the blonde man was genuinely jealous. Hannah was delighted that her mother was watching them and seemed very pleased. Taking her fake boyfriend's arm, she suggested they not bother Mr. Li anymore. The brown-haired man tried to grab her rather roughly. Hannah, interrupting his attempt, asked what he wanted. He noticed, with a gloomy expression, that Hannah was being completely uncooperative. Mr. Li said it was disgusting. Brown-haired had planned for the girl not to panic, but to flatter him like the others. Mr. Li dreamed of having her by his side. In high school, he invited the cool-headed girl to karaoke. The brown-haired man hoped to attract her attention, but she didn't even look at him. Hannah declined the offer, explaining that she had a meeting. As she left with Wang Xun, the businesswoman remarked that she hadn't understood what he was talking about. Hannah suggested that the blonde man step away. After a pleasant evening, the girl washed her hands after using the restroom. The businesswoman was very pleased that her mother hadn't suspected anything and that the Li family's son hadn't done anything wrong. The girl planned to stay for a while and then return home. Hannah remembered that they needed to leave before midnight, as the blonde man might turn. Entering the room, the brunette asked if she could disturb the girl. The brunette introduced herself as Tanya, explaining that her last name was Xiang. The girl asked if Hannah was in the jewelry business. The businesswoman was surprised by how beautiful she was. Hannah knew that if it weren't for the restroom, she could easily have been mistaken. Shaking the outstretched hand, the jewelry business owner explained that she had long heard of Miss Xiang. Hannah asked what this brunette needed. Tanya, growing nervous, explained that she actually wanted to ask for help with a trivial matter. The brunette shared that she had planned to propose to her boyfriend, whom she had been dating for many years. Tanya explained that she wanted to order a ring. The brunette claimed the ring's design was quite unusual. She suggested that if she went to a regular store, she'd be turned away 100% of the time. Hannah was surprised, as women rarely proposed. The jewelry business owner inquired about how unusual the ring needed to be. Hannah explained that it was possible to make any ring as long as it did not exceed the metal limits. Nervously, the brunette explained she wanted to order a large number of men's rings, ranging in diameter from 1 millimeter to 5 centimeters. She explained that she wanted a gradual change in size. The brunette said the price wasn't much of an issue. A little taken aback, Hannah asked if there was any point in making so many. The girl assumed her new acquaintance had a lot of boyfriends. Hannah realized that this logic didn't quite add up either. The brunette, flustered, explained that that was precisely why she hadn't ordered from the store. Tanya said she didn't want it to become public. The brunette explained that everyone had their own little secrets. The jewelry store owner promised not to ask about it again. Hannah explained that she was waiting for a new client during her free time at their company's office. The woman offered to choose a suitable model. Tanya thanked her and quickly left. Standing in the hall, the blonde noticed that Hannah had been gone for quite some time. He felt his body a little restless and had to suppress it. Approaching the boy, the brown-haired man pretended to be glad to see him. The blonde man coolly mentioned that Hannah had gone to the restroom. Smiling, Mr. Lee explained that he was the one he was looking for. The guy turned away and replied that he didn't know his new acquaintance very well. The brown-haired man asked under what conditions the guy was willing to break up with Hannah. Mr. Lee joked that he didn't want to be like the evil mother-in-law in TV shows and send people away with money. Shaitan suggested that the guy might need it. Mr. Lee was certain that as a bartender, he would want to own his own establishment. The businessman claimed that if the blonde man broke up with Hannah, he would immediately transfer ownership of the establishment to him. Wang Shunya asked how one establishment could compare to Hannah's entire family. The brown-haired man, very nervous, asked what he meant. The bartender explained that he wasn't that stupid. The blonde man explained with a grin that if he accepted the offer, he'd only be able to get one establishment. He was certain that if he took good care of Hannah, he'd become her future son-in-law. Wang Shunya explained that his rival would have to offer something more valuable than the Han families. The blonde man asked if he would agree to these conditions. Stepping back, the brown-haired man remembered he'd prepared for all possible scenarios. Returning from the restroom, Hannah asked what the boys had been secretly talking about. The girl reminded him that time was running out and it was time for them to leave. Brown-haired asked Hannah to wait, explaining that he had something she needed to hear. Mr. Lee took out his phone and started recording the conversation. The potential groom asked the girl to make a decision after she finished listening to the recording. The brown-haired man asked the girl if she recognized the voice of the man standing next to her. Mr. Lee insisted the blonde man was not who he seemed. Shaitan insisted that Wang Shun was eager to seize her family's property. Hannah offered her fiancé leave, firmly grasping his hand. The man, becoming very nervous, noticed that the girl had misunderstood everything, and that the blonde man did not actually love her, but was only using her. The brown-haired man asked if the girl intended to leave it at that. Looking down, Hannah assumed Mr. Lee had told her this because he liked her. The girl asked her ex not to go too far. The businesswoman asked the man not to interfere where he wasn't wanted. The mutant's heart began to pound wildly. The girl noticed they'd managed to resolve the issue. Hannah suggested they go home as soon as possible. The girl asked where the blonde man lived. The businesswoman assumed the guy lived somewhere along the road to her house. Hannah admitted she'd been drinking and couldn't drive. The woman offered to find a sober driver. The blonde man explained that this wasn't necessary since he had a driver's license. As he got behind the wheel, he promised to take her home and then call a taxi. The girl suggested the blonde man simply take the car and return it next time. Hannah asked why he didn't stay with her. The businesswoman explained that she had a guest room. Looking down, the mutant asked if the girl remembered what had happened so recently. Wang Shunya reminded him that he was a bad guy and had taken advantage of her. A little nervous, the client asked if Mr. Wang really had that impression of himself. The black BMW sped along the night roads. The blonde man answered affirmatively without hesitation. The mutant explained that achieving immense wealth was easy, an opportunity everyone dreamed of. Hannah noticed that his statement was largely correct. The girl explained that such a marriage was not suitable for slackers. She knew that if you want power, you first need to improve your performance and prove your success. The guy nervously asked her if she wasn't worried that, after marriage, half of her property would be taken by a man who wouldn't love her. Hannah shared that she understood this perfectly well. She assumed that if the guy said this at the time of the conversation, it only proved that he had intentionally told Mr. Lee this. Looking down, the girl assumed the blonde man wasn't interested in her family's property. Hannah asked if he'd agree if she bought their marriage with money. After a moment's thought, Wang Shunya explained that he wasn't at all opposed to the proposal. Driving, the young man became lost in his memories. As a child, he heard scholars talking about how the Han family were their main sponsors. The researchers were delighted to be able to continue their experiments. The brunette noted with a grin that the sponsors had provided the most money and truly supported the captive program. The scientist told her colleague that all the test subjects had been purchased by the Han family. The brunette explained that otherwise, they wouldn't have been able to kill people at the research institute. The scientist was certain the group could only be viewed as monsters in human form. She didn't care whether the subjects died or not. As the girl slept on his lap, the blonde man didn't want to doubt her, despite her being from the Han family. Wang Shunya asked if the girl had heard of the Han company. The little girl admitted she'd heard of it and was familiar with the company, as it was her family's. Horror and disappointment appeared in the blonde man's amber eyes. Touching his shoulder, the girl tore him away from his memories. Hannah asked him what he was constantly thinking about. The client asked why he didn't answer her. The blonde lied, claiming he'd been too focused on the road. He asked her again what she'd said a few moments earlier. Rolling her eyes, she explained that what she'd said hadn't been important. Stretching, Hannah agreed with the blonde man's opinion. She noticed that her work brought her much more than her partner. The client admitted that sometimes she yearned for emotions so desperately, like a moth drawn to a flame. Wang Shunyi's heart began to pound wildly, and a glimmer of mist appeared before her eyes. The blonde explained that the sensation of a moth flying to a flame wasn't funny at all. The guy explained that the difference in power between the two was too great. Laughing, Hannah insisted she was fine. Smiling, she explained that she hadn't had the strength before, but now she was confident. The client noted that the guy could do something for his partner. The blonde remarked that life without strength was the same as life in chaos. Hannah, not hearing his words, asked him again what he had just said. "I'll tell Wang Shun that they've already arrived." The man asked Hannah to take her time. The client thanked him and creaked open the door of her luxury BMW. She asked if he wanted to park and come inside with her. Hannah noticed they hadn't had enough time to get close. Looking down, the blonde man explained that inviting a man into the house was considered very dangerous. Wang Shunya asked her to respect herself. Hannah asked him why he was being so stubborn. She remembered they'd shared a hotel room. The blonde man asked her to leave him alone and leave as quickly as possible. The mutant's appearance was becoming unstable. Hannah, looking out the car window, realized that Mr. Wang had transformed earlier than usual. Opening the car door, the girl quickly led him to her entrance. The concierge looked at the suspicious creature with bewilderment. The elevator quickly reached the 23rd floor. The girl breathed a sigh of relief as she neared her apartment. But there, under the coat, the creature was fidgeting nervously. Hannah reassured the blonde man that her house was under closed management. The girl insisted that no one would get in. Having pushed aside the heavy fabric, the customer admitted that last time she was quite shocked to see tentacles, but she did not expect that there was something like this. The girl noticed with affection that Wang Shun had indeed transformed into a polar bear. Unintelligible sounds came from the mutant's mouth. Hannah was surprised that the blonde man couldn't speak in this form. The client playfully asked the guy what he'd been eating in this guise. An inaudible growl emanated from the polar bear's mouth. Hannah remarked that it was quite amusing. Opening the black metal door, the client asked her guest to come in. The woman asked the mutant not to defecate anywhere. Hannah explained that they could discuss the rest after he came to his senses. Hesitantly, the mutant saw a multitude of dogs. Wang Shunya was surprised that the girl liked them so much. The girl sternly asked them not to chew on the dolls. Hannah entered the guest room, announcing that the guest could sleep there. The client explained that she had ordered a large bed, 2.5 meters. She asked if the guest could lie down. He shook his head. The mutant tried his best to show that he couldn't suppress the beast. Hannah assumed he was trying to say, okay. She asked him what he should order. She was deciding between sushi and plain salmon. The businesswoman said she'd go order it quickly, so it could be delivered early in the morning. As she was leaving, Hannah called the delivery service, saying she wanted top-quality salmon. Wang Shunya wanted to say he could eat human food. The mutant, though uneasy, realized from the room that he probably shouldn't have slept on the bed, so he decided to lie down on the floor. The hostess lowered his eyes and realized he'd caused Hannah trouble again. Wang Shunya knew that if this continued, the girl would sooner or later suffer. That day, the blonde man pinned the girl to the ground by the throat. He asked her if she knew why he was constantly being tortured and experimented on. The little girl didn't understand what had happened and why her friend had suddenly become so angry. Wang Shun swung his sword and struck her fiercely. Crimson droplets flew into the air. The mutant claimed that Xiao Ju was on the side that wanted to hurt him. The girl insisted that he should calm down. She claimed she couldn't understand who wanted to hurt the blonde. Wang Shunya, breaking into a scream, explained that his friend had suddenly appeared and had been constantly at his side. The blonde man claimed that people like him were worthless and couldn't be liked by anyone. He was convinced his girlfriend was talking to him for some other reason. Wang Shunya tried to force the girl to confess her purpose in coming to him. Cold beads of sweat ran down the girl's face. Hannah couldn't understand why he didn't believe she genuinely liked him. The blonde asked if she wanted to experiment on him or simply see the monster up close. The girl recalled that a few days ago he had been in wolf form and didn't understand the reason for his aggression. The blonde man claimed that if Hannah's family hadn't sponsored the project, he wouldn't have been given so many drugs. The boy insisted that if it weren't for them, he wouldn't have been in so much pain. With horror in her eyes, the girl asked if he thought killing her would allow him to take revenge on those who had mistreated him. A multitude of new, terrifying limbs dangled chaotically above his back, causing excruciating pain. With tears in his eyes, Wang Shunya explained that he hadn't meant to kill his friend. With trembling hands, he released her neck. The guy collapsed on Hannah, explaining that he didn't know why it hurt so much. The blonde was sure he should hate his friend, but he couldn't. Shouting, Wang Shun explained that he didn't want her to hate him. Hannah promised to help him escape that hellish place. Having calmed down a bit, the boy asked again. There wasn't a hint of doubt on the little girl's face. Smiling, she repeated once again that she would help him escape. Hannah's parents insisted their daughter would become an outstanding person. Everyone was certain she couldn't make a mistake, as it would bring shame on the Han family. Her parents claimed that she could not think about whether it was right or wrong. The elders were certain she must obey their orders. These words echoed in the girl's head. Jumping out of bed, she realized she had had another nightmare. The girl realized that lately she had been constantly dreaming about a monster killing her. From time to time, Hannah felt like she was hallucinating. The half-asleep girl picked up a glass and decided to pour herself some water. She accidentally kicked something soft. The client was surprised to see the mutant sleeping by the door. Hannah pressed her foot lightly against the soft fur and realized her friend was fast asleep by the door. It seemed to her that if she stepped on him, he wouldn't wake up. Hannah realized why the mutated animals couldn't speak. She still had the feeling that the animal could speak like humans. The girl knew she couldn't confuse her feelings for the puppy with Mr. Van's. Hannah knew it would be disrespectful to both of them. Looking down, the client realized Chen Feng was right when he said Mr. Wang was only doing everything for the money. Hannah felt a little sad that the mutant didn't actually like her. With shining eyes, the girl realized that even if the mutant didn't have feelings for her, he was still very fluffy. She hoped the sleepy polar bear wouldn't mind if she cuddled him. Lying down on the cold floor, the girl buried her face in the soft, warm wool. The boy realized that if he opened his eyes, they would both be very embarrassed. Wang Shun realized they were in a very perverse position. He was sure that if he pretended to be fast asleep, Hannah would get tired and leave. The girl realized that Mr. Wang hadn't been wearing any clothes when he transformed into a polar bear. She was curious to see whether the blonde man was male or female. Hannah parted the soft fur, gently touching his manhood. The mutant wanted to forbid her client from doing this. The girl smiled and remarked that touching it was quite an unusual sensation. The mutant, his ears pressed back in disappointment, realized that she truly was treating him like an animal. The fluffy creature rolled over, pinning the girl to the floor. Hannah assumed it had woken up. She quietly called its name. The only response was the peaceful snoring of a predatory animal. The client quickly realized he'd simply rolled over. Hannah hugged the mutant tightly. Wang Shun knew he couldn't bear to wake up naked next to her as a human. The girl yawned sweetly, realizing she was very soft and warm and sleepy. In her sleep, she said she really liked it and, without finishing her sentence, fell into a deep sleep. Wang Shunya didn't understand what this phrase meant and wanted to ask his friend to speak more clearly. Soon, the powerful paws began to transform into human hands. The blonde quickly turned around. As he hugged the girl tightly, he realized he'd almost gotten used to such incidents. The bright rays of the sun woke the girl. Hannah was sure she had fallen asleep on the floor the night before and couldn't understand why she woke up in bed the next morning. While slicing a piece of salmon into thin slices, the girl called out to Mr. Wang. The client was surprised that he'd come back. The blonde man reported that, just like with the tentacles, the mutation had appeared and resolved very quickly. Hannah yawned sweetly and asked what determined the duration of a mutation. After slicing salmon for breakfast, the blonde man explained that only 2 similar situations had occurred, and it was difficult to draw conclusions so early. Wang Shunya reported that he had paid for the salmon delivery. After throwing the mushrooms into the pot, he noted that the human body couldn't possibly handle so much. The blonde man admitted he'd taken over the kitchen without permission. The guest asked if Hannah wanted anything to eat. The girl admired the blonde man's housekeeping skills. The customer noticed that Mr. Wang had decided to make her a bento. The blonde man said that he had nothing to do in the morning and promised to bring the dish to the girl's company when it was ready. Wang Shunya noted that it was better to eat such fish fresh, since the taste would be slightly different if left for a long time. Smiling, Hannah assured that she hadn't cooked at home for a long time and really missed it. The girl laughed and remarked that he was very caring. She insisted that she wanted to marry him, but for a few moments the blonde was lost in memories. The little mutant greedily ate the food brought in the container. The girl explained that no one had taken his food away and he could eat more slowly. The boy apologized and explained that he had never eaten such delicious food. The blonde man asked if he would make her hungry. Hannah reassured him that she'd had plenty of food for breakfast and was still full. Opening a large box, the girl announced she'd also brought a cake and suggested they try them together. The box contained several small cakes shaped like puppies. Amber eyes lit up when they saw cupcakes shaped like little puppies. The blonde man asked why one of the cakes was gray. Hannah admitted that she'd asked the chef to teach her how to cook. The girl insisted that despite all her efforts, she couldn't make the cake round. She assumed her hands weren't up to the job, as others had gotten it right the first time. Confused, the blonde figure assumed Xiaozhu had been deliberately trying to create one of his appearances. He noticed that it looked quite similar. The girl snatched the cake and asked her to forget it, explaining that it wasn't tasty anyway, and asked her not to eat it. The mutant asked if his friend had meant to give it to him. Wang Shun reached for the cakes and realized he couldn't take them back. The girl asked him to be careful, insisting she was about to drop the treats on the ground. Smiling, the blonde man explained that he'd managed to snag the treat. Hannah resolutely slobbered all over the failed cake. The girl realized that the cake she'd made had truly been difficult to eat. The blonde man declared that his friend couldn't scare him at all and bit the other side of the cake. Hannah stepped back and asked what he was doing. The little girl was convinced that boys and girls weren't allowed to kiss before marriage. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to get married. Smiling, the blonde man asked if he could kiss her if she married him. The boy promised to marry her when he got out of the lab. Hannah, surprised, asked if his words were true. The little girl hoped that Xiao Wu would replace the one her father had chosen. The blonde realized that, despite his promise, he had still betrayed her. The businesswoman asked Tanya what she thought of the design. Hannah explained that the larger rings were easy to machine, while the smaller ones would be created using micro-engraving technology. Smiling, the brunette agreed to go with that option. She asked if she could add a name engraving on the inside of the ring. Smiling, Hannah explained that it was no problem and asked for the text the client wanted to write. The businesswoman suggested simply telling her the name of the client's boyfriend. After this question, a ringtone filled the room. The brunette, embarrassed, explained that it was her boyfriend calling. Hannah really liked the idea of using her boyfriend's voice as a ringtone. Tanya replied coldly that she hadn't been sitting at home, but she hadn't been out with anyone either. The girl insisted she hadn't been messing around and was simply minding her own business. Tanya wanted to convince him that she had indeed been very busy. The extremely nervous brunette asked her lover to stay down and promised to come to him as soon as possible. Tanya asked him not to pass out. Deeply embarrassed, the girl apologized, explaining that her boyfriend had installed a couple's GPS on her phone. Tanya explained that he had been sitting downstairs, waiting to check that she was actually there. The girl assumed she'd have to bring her lover into the room. The brunette asked if she could ask him for a favor. The client asked Hannah to pretend they were simply hanging out with a group of women. The director found it very odd to pretend the girl was tracking her location and spying. Hannah found it odd that the guy was getting up to check on his girlfriend. With a forced smile, Hannah asked if everything was okay with the guy. Entering the room, the guy asked if his girlfriend was there. A green-haired guy entered the room. He introduced himself as Lou. Right from the door, the guy declared that he couldn't stand his girlfriend's behavior. Lou noticed that the girl's behavior had been very strange in recent days. The guy noticed his girlfriend wandering around various shopping malls but returning without making a single purchase. Lou asked her what she was doing behind his back. The brunette calmly reminded her that she'd met an old friend of hers and they'd gone shopping and chatted. Hannah was surprised that the guy was so tall. Tanya introduced the girl as her best friend. The brunette explained to Hannah that Li Yu was her boyfriend. The girl, embarrassed, explained that her lover was used to spending time in the lab and wasn't used to interacting with people. Tanya asked the girl to forgive him if he had offended her. The fake friend smiled and pretended to be very happy to see him. The scientist angrily noticed that his girlfriend had lied to him. Li Yu noticed that the brunette had previously disliked shopping and didn't spend the entire day with anyone. The guy assumed his fiancée had fallen in love with Hannah. Confused, the businesswoman explained that they were both girls. Li Yu explained that feelings could suddenly arise between people of the same sex. Hannah became very nervous that he was talking about people's preferences so casually. With tears in his eyes, the scientist suggested that Tanya was cheating on him because she was already bored with him. The guy was convinced it was a 7-year relationship crisis. Li Yu insisted the truth could change and was convinced he was a worthless man. Hannah realized the man had started talking to himself. The businesswoman didn't know what to do in such situations. Falling to his knees, the man begged his lover not to leave him, explaining that she couldn't leave. Tanya insisted she hadn't said she was leaving. A silent question popped into Hannah's head. Was everything okay with the guy? Smiling, the brunette asked her not to be afraid of her lover. Tanya said her fiancé's emotions were unstable. She insisted that Li Yu would never harm others. Confused, the brunette explained that the location tracking app had been installed with her permission. With an awkward smile, Hannah assured him she understood. The girl shared that she hadn't expected Miss Xiang to be attracted to that type of guy. The brunette shared that she'd never thought about her type. The girl whispered tenderly that she didn't intend to leave the guy alone and asked him to get up. Tanya explained that it suddenly dawned on her that he was the best option. Hannah decided to tell Mr. Li the truth. The businesswoman explained that she and Tanya were just friends. The girl lied that she wanted to choose a gift for her boyfriend, whose birthday was coming up soon. Embarrassed, Hannah explained that she couldn't decide and so asked a friend for help. She knew she could always pretend to be a girl, that she was always thinking about relationships. With a beaming smile, Lou realized that Hannah's words had made sense. The scientist guessed he'd been thinking too much about his lover leaving him. The brunette was overjoyed that her lover had taken the situation seriously. Hannah was relieved that the trouble had passed. Li Yu asked his new acquaintance to tell him about her boyfriend's hobbies. The scientist remarked that he too was a man, and that his proposed solution would carry weight. Hannah was furious, as no one needed his help. Without missing a beat, the businesswoman explained that this wasn't a problem. She realized she didn't even have a so-called boyfriend. The guy looked suspiciously at Hannah and asked why she refused. The scientist realized his new acquaintance had lied to him. The businesswoman realized she had promised to help Miss Xiang to the end. Knocking on the door, Xiaoshan asked if her boss had finished. The brunette entered the room and announced that a gentleman had arrived with her lunch. The woman remarked that the stranger was very handsome. Xiaoshan insisted there was plenty of food. She asked her friend if she should invite guests over for dinner. As they were heading out, her boss asked where her boyfriend was. As she walked out into the hall, the girl saw a blond man carrying a large bag. Wang Shun asked if he had disturbed Mrs. Hannah. The blond man promised to leave. Grabbing his hand, the girl asked him not to leave and to come with her. Soon the table was filled with delicious food featuring salmon. Hannah introduced the blond man as her boyfriend. The businesswoman asked if there was any reason to worry. Somewhat taken aback, the scientist explained that he hadn't suspected his lover from the start. The girl was delighted that Hannah's boyfriend had prepared such a variety of dishes. Jealousy flashed in Li Yu's eyes. The brunette remarked that her friend was very lucky. The scientist asked the brunette not to praise another man, insisting that he could do the same. Hannah awkwardly thanked him for the praise. The blonde whispered to his friend what they were doing. Wang Shunya carefully placed another piece of salmon in the fake girl's hand. Hannah explained that he should suffer with her. Holding out her hand, the brunette insisted that the dish was truly delicious. The girl asked if her lover would like to try it too. The scientist, embarrassed, explained that he was only willing to try it because his lover had asked him to. Liu noticed that the dish was indeed quite good. Suddenly, the boy's body began to tremble violently. Tanya rushed to him and asked how he was feeling. The scientist, breathing heavily, explained that the food contained peanuts. Hannah asked in surprise, watching the boy's unsteady gait as he tried to escape. Tanya asked the businesswoman to lock them in the room and not let anyone in. Jumping up from her chair, the headmistress asked if she should call an ambulance. The blond man grabbed Hannah's hand and addressed her by name. She anxiously asked why he was dragging the conversation out. Tanya held her lover by the waist and warned him to be careful. Cold sweat slowly trickled down the scientist's cheeks. A few moments later, the boy began shrinking into his clothes. Hannah watched in amazement. The blond man suggested that Li Yu also had a mutation. Sitting down at the table, Tanya explained that she no longer had anything to hide. Looking down, the brunette explained that her boyfriend sometimes shrank. Wrapped in a handkerchief, the scientist sat next to his lover, awkwardly looking at his new acquaintances. Tanya explained that her lover was not a monster and was of sound mind. The businesswoman and her fake boyfriend approached, looking at the mutant. Li Yu asked them not to approach him, explaining that men and women cannot touch each other. The scientist explained that he had a girlfriend. Tanya extended her finger and asked her lover not to worry. The brunette explained that Li Yu had been allergic to peanuts his entire childhood. The girl said there was nothing serious, but accidentally eating peanuts caused changes in his body. The scientist gently rubbed his cheek against his lover's finger. Tanya said that sometimes it would increase or decrease by a few centimeters, but sometimes it would become very small or very large. Smiling, the brunette joked that if it had grown any larger, the ceiling would have been in jeopardy. The blonde apologized, claiming he hadn't known the gentleman had a peanut allergy. Tanya awkwardly asked Wang Shun not to blame himself. She admitted she hadn't expected the fish to contain peanut butter. The brunette calmly explained that it didn't really matter as long as it didn't frighten her new acquaintances. Tanya explained that it was a human mutation and asked them to keep it a secret. The businesswoman realized she'd ordered just the right size so her husband could wear the ring on any occasion. Hannah realized she should have kept quiet about the engagement rings. The little mutant asked again about the order. Confused, the girl promised not to tell anyone, since they knew people like no one else. Hannah sighed dreamily and explained that she hadn't expected Miss Xiang's fiancé to possess such abilities. She was surprised there were so many mutants around. The businesswoman asked why the hostess wasn't happy. Hannah explained that the blond man now had an ally. Wang Shunya explained that he'd only assumed the peanut was the condition for his mutation. Glancing at the bottle of alcohol, the blond man inquired about his personal factor. Hannah noticed that every time he suddenly mutated, she was there. The guy confirmed that this was the rule, with no exceptions. Smiling, the client reminded him that they already lived together. Hannah asked if he would come to her place that evening. The girl suggested conducting an experiment. Looking at his reflection, Wang Shun sighed heavily. The blonde felt like he would never remember those events. The boy paced nervously around the room, trying to convince himself he had to let go. The mutant was trying to convince himself he had to let Hannah go. He was convincing himself he was nothing but trouble for the girl. Coming out of the bathroom, the blonde man saw her bra. Sitting at her laptop, the businesswoman remembered she'd forgotten to pick up her things from the bathroom. Hannah laughed nervously and suggested that it would be very awkward if Mr. Wang saw her underwear. Sitting down next to her, the blonde man explained that if the girl was the trigger for the mutation, then an experiment would need to be conducted. The blonde man suggested that by understanding this, he could control the mutation rate. Hannah was actively typing on her laptop, listening attentively to the guy's ideas. The girl suggested they take a shower, explaining that the perfume smell in the store was too strong. The businesswoman suggested an experiment after the shower. After a slight hesitation, Wang Shun asked if the girl would go. Smiling, Hannah explained that she needed to sort out some things. The girl offered to let the blonde man go first. Wang Shun nodded and said he'd use the bathroom. Hannah said there was a clean towel in the dresser. Leaning over the sink, the guy wondered why he'd come into her apartment. Wang Shun begged himself not to overthink things. He knew it was just an experiment, and Hannah had no feelings for him. The mutant once again delved into his childhood memories. Xiaozhu said she looked at her father's computer and realized something. The little girl explained that the reason the scientists were able to find him was due to a tracking device under the mutant's skin. Hannah warned him that if he wanted to escape, he should first retrieve the device. The blonde man, distrustful, asked where it was. Somewhat confused, Hannah reported that the device seemed to be in her leg. She asked if he had felt anything in that area. She began gently probing his leg. Wang Shunya reported that there was something near his ankle. The boy inquired how they could have obtained the location transmitter. Looking down, Hannah asked him if he was afraid of pain. The blonde explained that he didn't like pain, but claimed he wasn't afraid of it. The mutant claimed to experience pain daily. Feeling the device with her fingers, the girl asked if her friend believed her. Wang Shunya explained that he hadn't understood her before, but had recently realized that Xiaozhu was his dearest friend. The blonde man insisted that she would definitely become his wife in the future. The girl pressed the device again, promising that she would soon start reading medical books. Hannah promised she'd be able to free him soon. A long time later, a suitcase containing medical instruments stood on the grass in the yard. Holding the blade in her trembling hands, Hannah explained that she was a little afraid. She knew she might cut too deep, and adults might notice. Wang Shun, clutching the knife tightly in the girl's hand, assured her that everything would be fine. The blonde insisted that he could feign illness and be left alone for a few days. The boy explained that after a while, the experiments would be inevitable, and the scientists wouldn't notice anything. The blonde explained that his friend would help him and asked her not to be afraid. Hannah explained, her voice shaking, that she'd never done anything like this before. The baby's hands were shaking. She realized there might be too much blood. The blonde explained that he trusted her and asked her to trust him. The mutant was willing to do anything for freedom. The box cutter deftly sliced through his flesh. With a nervous laugh, Hannah realized it would be awkward if Mr. Wang saw her underwear, which she had left in the bathroom. She closed her laptop, finishing her work. Knocking on the door, the girl asked if the blonde man had showered. The businesswoman asked if he could open the door so she could get her things. The girl's question was met with a ringing silence. Hannah couldn't understand why her guest was silent. The girl knew the house was well soundproofed, but she doubted he couldn't hear her from such a close distance. Listening closely, the businesswoman heard a rustling sound. A few moments later, the blonde man said she could come in. Hannah assumed the boy hadn't transformed, but she couldn't figure out what could have happened. Entering the bathroom, the girl was stunned to notice Wang Shun had shrunk. He remarked that his voice had become quieter since he'd shrunk. The businesswoman carefully lifted the blonde man up. Covering himself, Wang Shun asked them not to take off his underwear. Hannah was surprised that the blonde man was wearing only his underwear before he shrank. The girl explained that he didn't need to cover his entire body with underwear. The businesswoman laughed and explained that with such a small size, it was almost impossible to see anything. Hannah noticed that he had transformed while she was away. She assumed the previous transformations were accidents. Hannah wondered if it had anything to do with her. Looking away, the blonde explained that it was directly related to her. He didn't understand why the girl's underwear was hanging in the bathroom. The mutant, looking down, explained that this mutation had occurred outside the cycle. Wang Shunya noted that this confirmed that external factors were still in play. Embarrassed, the blonde man asked for a handkerchief or a towel instead of clothes. The guy explained that his underwear needed to be washed. Wang Shunya doubted the girl would want to touch his clothes. Hannah sat her friend down next to a small dollhouse. The mutant inquired with disbelief about what his mistress had in mind. The girl explained that she'd bought a dollhouse for a girl who'd recently visited her. Hannah was picking out cute princess doll outfits for the boy. The blonde noticed that the dresses looked genuinely cute when they weren't on him. Wang Shunya wondered if there were any men's clothes there too. The businesswoman laughed and asked how such houses could have men's clothes. Hannah rummaged around in the closet for a bit and found a prince's suit. The girl was surprised by what the children were playing with. The businesswoman promised to ask Miss Shang about safety precautions after the reduction. Hannah asked the boy to take his time and left, dialing Tanya's number. Returning to the room, Hannah noticed that the boy really did look like a prince from a fairy tale. He lowered his eyes and sat down on the small doll-like sofa. Wang Shunya noticed that the lady had previously claimed she wasn't interested in the prince. The businesswoman explained that she wasn't interested, but she knew something. Leaning over him, the girl carefully examined the small silhouette. Hannah noticed that Mr. Wang had been very handsome when he had shrunk. She liked this form of transformation. The girl blew lightly on the blonde man. His soft hair began to flutter in the breeze. The hostess, shielding himself with his hand, asked what she was doing. Laughing, Hannah explained that Tanya was right and the little people were very funny. She asked if Wang Shun would mind if she continued doing this. The businesswoman was glad to have a pocket boyfriend. Hannah noticed that the blonde man was as warm as a normal person. Embarrassed, the hostess asked her not to touch him anywhere. She placed the guy on the table and gave him a large strawberry. The blonde man greedily bit into the giant fruit. Filming him on her phone, Hannah noticed how cute he looked eating in the skies. Soon, dusting himself off, the mutant announced that he'd found something lost behind the closet. Looking closer, the businesswoman realized it was the very ring she'd once lost. The girl remarked that Wang Shunyi's current appearance was very cool. Hannah was delighted that he truly looked like a little prince. The blonde whispered that he didn't look like a prince at all. Wang Shun said he'd go look for something else. The blonde felt as if they were from different worlds. He felt as if Hannah had found an old toy. The mutant couldn't tell whether this was just a whim or a sign of intimacy. Wang Shunya was worried that as soon as the girl became bored, she would leave without looking back. After the games, the boy headed in the other direction. His head held high, he paced the table. Pulling him by the hem of his clothes, Hannah asked him to wait and explained that she wanted to ask him something. The girl asked if he would mind helping her take some photos. Handing him the find, the businesswoman asked if he could put the ring on her finger. Hannah explained she wanted to take a few photos. The girl explained that after talking with Tanya, she had thought about many things. The businesswoman realized that there were many mutants in the world, like Wang Shun and Li Yu. Hannah wondered if mutants would want to wear the ring when they transformed. The girl recalled that after a mutation, there's a high chance the jewelry won't fit. Hannah explained that after the transformation, the illusion arises that the person wasn't the same lover. The businesswoman explained that most people didn't care about those factors. Hannah understood that there were those for whom it was very important. Approaching the girl's work laptop, Wang Shun saw a new advertisement for custom-made rings. The blonde man suggested trying to take that photo. The businesswoman thanked him for his help. The mutant remembered his promise to marry the girl and realized it was time to make it come true. Placing the jewelry on the girl's finger, he tenderly kissed its knuckle. Soon, hundreds of copies of this photograph were printed as an advertisement. Hannah called her fake boyfriend and informed him that the photos had already begun to be published. The girl asked the blonde not to worry, assuring him that he looked great in them. Hannah reported that the advertisement generated so much buzz that they received several orders from supposed mutants. The businesswoman asked the guy if he wanted to quit his job as a hostess and become a full-time model for the company. The blonde man declined the offer, explaining that his body might transform during filming. He reminded her that she had used photos of the hostess in an advertisement for her company. Wang Shunya asked if she was worried about damaging the company's reputation. The girl assured him that her appearance had changed significantly after the treatment. Hannah apologized if the posted photos caused any trouble to Mr. Wang. The blonde man suggested that people who looked similar could easily be confused. Wang Shun asked him not to pursue the matter further. The guy asked Hannah what her plans were for the evening. He assured her they'd cut their shift and had some free time. The businesswoman insisted she wanted to introduce him to her family. The girl invited Wang Shunyu to dinner. Hannah warned him that her family wasn't the easiest and explained that he should have done his homework. Opening the door for her, the mutant asked the girl to tell the honest truth. Looking down, Hannah shared that her biological parents had long since divorced and that her mother now lived with her stepfather. The girl explained that they had a good relationship and the boy could call him uncle. Wang Shunya asked how long ago the girl's parents had been divorced. Hannah, a little hesitant, asked why the guy was so interested. The businesswoman explained that the incident had happened when she was still in elementary school. The woman smiled and said she was very happy to see Hannah and her fiancé. The brunette said that if work came up, they could postpone the event until another time. With a smile on his face, the blonde man explained to the woman that his schedule was quite flexible. Jian Li informed her daughter that the man was her husband and Hannah's stepfather. The brunette reported that the boy might have called the man Uncle Joe. Extending his hand to the boy, the man gave his full name and introduced himself. With a smile on her face, Hannah told her stepfather that her lover found out that Joe liked tea sets, and the guy bought one for his future son-in-law. With a beaming smile, the girl handed her mother a swallow's nest. The brunette noted that her daughter always knew what to bring her. Joe assumed the guests were very tired. The man invited the couple to make themselves comfortable and assured them he would brew them some strong tea. The blonde man asked if his cuts would be suitable for the dish. Joe was delighted, as he hadn't thought the young people had such culinary skills. Smiling, the brown-haired man explained that Hannah was constantly working, and it was a great relief to learn about her boyfriend. Wang Shunya shared that he usually tried to cook something light for his beloved. The boy, surprised, asked why Joe cooked on his own. The blonde man was convinced that Hannah's parents had a cook and a maid or something like that at home. Joe explained that they had a housekeeper, but he insisted that his wife enjoyed it when he did housework. The man shared that he himself came from a simple family and was not so spoiled. Joe was convinced that if you want to do something, it is better to do it yourself. Visibly nervous, the blonde man asked if he could ask a question. Upon hearing an affirmative answer, the young man began his speech. Wang Shun asked them all to forget what he'd said. The man asked if he'd meant to ask if he'd felt pressured and had become unworthy. The blonde man seemed a little taken aback, but agreed. Joe laughed, explaining that many people had their quirks. Natan shared that his aunt had indeed been married to a decent man in her previous marriage, but she hadn't been happy. The uncle explained that the woman later met him. The man shared that his wife would laugh, get angry, throw things, and cry uncontrollably around him. Joe explained that she felt the difference in status meant nothing back then. Shoten explained that as long as his lover needed him, he would be her best choice. Hannah and the blonde man stood next to the enormous, oversized bed. Wang Shunya asked what the girl's aunt meant. The guy shared that the brunette told him the guest room was being renovated and was the only usable room. The blonde noted that everything was pink, as if it were for a girl. The businesswoman explained that the room belonged to her personally. The girl insisted that her aunt wanted them to have fun. Hannah understood that the woman was deeply worried about her not getting married. The businesswoman explained that it would be strange to ask about separate rooms. Hannah reassured her that they would sleep under 2 separate blankets and wouldn't disturb each other. The blonde insisted he could sleep on the floor without any problem. The girl remarked that this was too much, as he was constantly helping her. Hannah couldn't let the guy sleep on the floor. The businesswoman warned him that she would go to the bathroom and change into her pajamas. She suggested that Wang Shun follow her. Slamming the bathroom door, Hannah couldn't understand how they'd ended up sleeping together. The businesswoman had been feigning calm the entire time, but she worried she'd overdone it. The girl realized that foolish Wang Shunya pretended every day that everything was normal. Her heart began to pound wildly, and her vision began to blur. Hidden memories flooded her. She remembered helping the blonde man escape. The mutant, limping heavily, begged her to slow down. Zhao Wu collapsed in intense pain, unable to run any further. The little girl explained that scientists would soon discover he was gone. The girl explained that she was ready to cover for him, but she insisted that they should take a break later. The mutant asked if she wanted to run away with him. Hannah explained that everything was fine. The girl insisted they weren't allowed to go to the hotel without identification. The little girl promised her friend she'd take him to school and hide him there for a while. While bandaging his injured leg, Hannah promised to bring him food and money every day. The girl hoped that soon no one would remember him. With determination in her eyes, Hannah promised to rescue him from the lab at any cost. The businesswoman couldn't understand what had just happened. She realized she'd remembered something, but she couldn't figure out what it was. Hannah realized that the boy from her memories resembled Mr. Wang. She convinced herself that she was simply overtired. Coming out of the shower, the blonde was surprised to see the girl on the floor. Wang Shun was sure they were supposed to be sleeping in the same bed. Gently touching the girl, the blonde whispered that she should lie down on the bed. Pulling the covers up higher, the businesswoman explained that she was already very sleepy. Wang Shun smiled, realizing his employer was incorrigible. The blonde wrapped the girl in a blanket and carried her to the bed. Panicked, Hannah asked him what he was up to and crawled out of bed. The blonde man explained to Hannah that she would be much more comfortable sleeping on the bed. The fake groom told the girl that he and his uncle would be going to the market the next day. The businesswoman tried to pull the blanket up higher. Hannah couldn't understand why her heart was beating wildly. She realized she had been different these last few days. Turning away from this guy, the businesswoman assumed it might have been because of the memories that had surfaced. Hannah convinced herself that all her problems were due to lack of sleep. As Hannah left her room, she overheard her mother talking. The brunette explained that if she could help in any way, she would be waiting for them too. A sleepy Hannah asked the brown-haired woman who was supposed to be coming. Jin Lee explained that an acquaintance had told her he was extremely interested in a poster in a jewelry store. The woman asked him to wait until they arrived. The guy was wary. The luxury car was parked in an equally luxurious courtyard. Entering the house, Mrs. Zhang asked Hannah where the child had been. The woman shared that if she hadn't accidentally noticed the poster, she wouldn't have known their long-lost son was alive. The brunette noted that an old friend had told her about it. Jin Lee recalled that the boy was about 7 years old at the time. The brunette sympathetically noted that the couple's young son had disappeared rather suddenly. Mr. Zhang shared that his wife had been very worried about the boy until now. With tears in her eyes, the gray-haired woman asked why God had done this to her. Ms. Zhang said her younger son had gotten lost, while her older son was running out of time. The brunette asked what had happened to her older son. The man, lowering his amber eyes, explained that the boy had been having health problems for more than 2 years. The gentleman explained that they did not want to struggle all their lives, losing their support and heritage, and because of this they were very nervous. Zhang said that they were delighted to see Wang Wu's photo and came immediately. Gritting his teeth, the boy watched the elders' conversation. Hannah anxiously asked if they were talking about him. The businesswoman wondered if the blonde boy had run away from home as a child. When the boy was born, the midwife jumped back and announced in a trembling voice that the lady had given birth to a monster. The blonde had known since childhood that some people were destined to be mistakes from birth. Even though the boy was born into a wonderful family, his father, mother, and older brother were all handsome, he wasn't like that. Because of this, his parents decided to get rid of their son. The man asked Xiao Wu to eat ice cream and wait for his father there. But darkness fell, and the people from the park went home. Soon, lightning and thunder ruined the weather. The little boy was left standing alone in the rain, waiting for his dad. When a white van pulled up, a multitude of hands grabbed the little boy. Seeing the guy's confusion, Hannah asked how he was feeling. The blonde explained that he wouldn't be able to leave. The girl remembered she hadn't asked the hostess about his family before. Hannah reminded her that the Zhang family owned a biopharmaceutical company. Interrupting the girl, Wang Shun explained that those people were strangers to him. Taking the boy's hand, Hannah assured him that if he didn't want to look at them, he didn't have to. The businesswoman explained that they could have climbed out the window since they were on the ground floor. The blonde man remembered that same brave little Xiaoju. The little girl insisted the fire was everywhere and they had no chance to escape. She insisted he had to get out, otherwise he could be returned to the lab. Hannah didn't want all their efforts to be in vain. She explained that she could delay the scientists and ask the blonde man to run away as quickly as possible. Hannah explained that as long as her father was around, they couldn't do anything to her. The little girl ran off into the distance. The boy's body began to shake, and the mutation began again. The businesswoman noticed that the hostess's body was rapidly becoming covered in fur. Sitting down next to him, Hannah asked if everything was okay with him. The girl insisted that she was obliged to hide the mutant as quickly as possible. The handle slowly lowered, and the brunette announced that Aunt Jan was desperate to see the couple. The brunette creaked open the door to the room and asked why her daughter hadn't answered. Jian Li was surprised by the open window, as she had asked her daughter to wait in that room. Hannah remarked that they were very lucky that the garage was in the garden behind her house. The businesswoman reassured the mutant that they could return at any time. The girl claimed she hadn't even had time to change. Breathing heavily, Wang Shunya asked if the girl had figured it out. Confused, Hannah asked what he meant. The girl asked if Mr. Wang had ever appeared to the Zhang family's relatives. She found it odd that they recognized the child they had lost 10 years ago from the poster. The mutant, his muzzle lowered, was surprised that the girl was still helping him. Hannah sternly remarked that he couldn't help himself. The businesswoman explained that they now knew everything about each other. She recalled that the Han family had done a favor for the Zhang family, and that it would be much easier for them to cooperate. Smiling, Hannah explained that Mr. Wang was much more important to her. She explained that she still wanted to ask Mr. Wang to pretend to be her boyfriend. Hannah extended her hand and asked him not to get upset. The businesswoman noticed that the blonde man was quite selfish. Throwing him on the bed, Hannah explained that if he took up the family business, he would be busy and would not be able to devote much time to her. Burying her nose in his fluffy fur, she explained that she would be very unhappy without his fluffy ears. Hannah joked that she had become addicted to his fluffiness. Wang Shunya asked her mistress not to do this. Taking a deep breath of his fur, the girl promised to cuddle him. Hannah knew the blonde didn't need to know she was more attracted to him when he was in his wolf form. The businesswoman began to doubt whether she should have gotten so close to him. She reassured herself that she could pay for it. Hannah squeezed the soft wool with pleasure. The businesswoman recalled that the man was from the Zhang family and didn't need the money. Hannah asked why the hostess didn't want to go home. The girl noticed he didn't look like someone who didn't enjoy running the family business. The mutant, looking down, explained that it wasn't worth dwelling on. The boy explained that his parents abandoned him and only looked for him to relieve themselves of the burden. Wang Shunya explained that he didn't feel guilty at all. The girl sympathetically asked how they could do this to him. Hannah was again flooded with childhood memories. A friend claimed his family had abandoned him, preventing him from returning home. He explained that his father was having problems with his business and couldn't make all the payments. Hannah clutched her head, realizing she'd seen something resembling a memory. The businesswoman asked them to ignore her recent behavior. Wang Shunya explained that he didn't want to remember it. The guy excitedly asked what Hannah was talking about. The blonde was very surprised by her behavior. Smiling, she explained that she was just a little tired. The businesswoman realized that hallucinations that occurred more than once were unlikely to be a coincidence. Wang Shun averted his gaze and apologized, suggesting that everything was due to his mutation. The boy assumed he'd always caused Hannah nothing but trouble. The businesswoman, patting him on the shoulder, assured him that that was what friends were for, to help each other. The girl asked him to squeeze his furry cheeks some more. Stopping her hand, the mutant explained that despite looking like an animal, he was still human. Hannah explained that it was indeed very difficult to keep this information in her head. The girl whispered that she couldn't resist his ponytail. With a slight hesitation, Wang Shun placed the girl's hand on his own and asked her to continue kneading his fur. Hannah anxiously asked if this was really possible. The girl reminded him that she hadn't forced him to do it. The mutant asked him to consider it a thank you for that day. Hannah said she wanted to have a barbecue. The girl asked if the mutant could cook some delicious meat for her. The blonde quickly agreed. Wang Shun realized that whatever he told himself was useless. He realized it was time to admit that he liked Hannah. The mutant sniffed the delicate scent of her perfume, realizing that she was a drop in an endless lake. Soon after meeting his parents, the boy's life began to return to normal. The blonde man continued working as a hostess. Fortunately, the Zhang family no longer obsessed over their disappearance, as if nothing had happened. Upon meeting Mrs. Zhang, one of the tail asked who she was looking for. The elderly lady asked if he knew if Mr. Wang had any free time. The blonde man explained to his mother that he was there and that the guest could come through. The colleague sincerely thanked Wang Shunyu. The blonde man asked how his mother had managed to find him. Smiling, the woman explained that if you search long enough, you're sure to find it. Mrs. Zhang asked why Xiao Wu. The boy asked his mother to keep quiet. asking them to discuss the matter elsewhere. Wang Shunya said they would use the room at his expense. The colleague waved and wished the blonde man good luck. The red-haired guy was perplexed that the blonde man was like that. After opening the door, Hannah announced that she had come to see Mr. Wang. With a smile on his face, the brunette explained that Wang Shunya had left with a guest a few moments earlier. The hostess asked the girl to wait a bit. The businesswoman remarked that the guy must have some free time. The red-haired man noticed that the young and wealthy woman was a regular customer of Brother Wang's. Smiling, the red-haired man offered to brighten the lady's wait with his presence. The hostess explained he was willing to do it completely free of charge. Hannah, with zero interest, explained she didn't need it. Opening her laptop, the businesswoman explained she wanted to get to work. The hostess, sitting next to her, explained he hadn't meant to offend her in any way. The boy noticed that Hannah was much more elegant and beautiful than the old lady who had secluded herself with Wang Shun. The hostess wasn't about to let such a rich girl slip away. Hannah asked again about the older lady. The hostess's expression brightened after that. Working on her laptop, Hannah listened to the conversation from a distance, barely participating in it. The hostess explained that he valued Miss Hannah much more. He shared that it was incredibly pleasant to communicate with his client. The worker realized he hadn't directly stated that Wang Shunya treated other guests better than her, but he had conveyed the message. Without looking up from her work, the customer asked for champagne. The hostess assumed everything was going according to plan, and the girl ordered the first bottle. Suddenly, the phone on the table lit up. Ignoring the intrusive host, the girl was glued to her phone, replying to Wang Shun's messages. The worker hoped Ms. Hannah wasn't too upset. The guy told her he'd ordered a bottle of good champagne for her. Hannah, standing by the host's reception door, didn't know what he was doing in private. The businesswoman was greatly irritated by the intrusive hostess. With a forced smile, he brought her champagne and asked if she wanted anything else. Hannah explained that she didn't need anything else and asked the intrusive worker to move away from her. The girl asked the guy not to disturb her. The host, shaking with displeasure, realized that the girl truly was murderous. Drinking glass after glass, Hannah couldn't understand what the blonde man was doing. The businesswoman asked if everything was okay. Time passed, and the blonde man still didn't respond. Hannah didn't know whether she should send another message or just go home. Despite her desire to sleep, the businesswoman waited for a response. Wang Shunya asked the girl to wait for him. The businesswoman couldn't understand why she had become so obedient. Hannah realized that he wouldn't make it, but for some reason, he couldn't reschedule the meeting for the next day. Peeking into the room, Hannah saw a blonde man standing next to his mother. The hostess asked the woman to return home. With a sob, Mrs. Zhang agreed. Mama asked Wang Shun to take care of himself. Hannah realized the woman was Aunt Zhang. The businesswoman was at a loss as to whether she should greet her old acquaintance in such a place. Hannah quietly sat down at her laptop and decided to pretend she hadn't noticed the woman at all. The guy couldn't understand why he'd initially assumed she was the killer. Holding Hannah tightly, the hostess whispered thanks in her ear. Confused, Hannah asked him what he was thanking her for. His colleagues gave him a couple of disapproving glances. The blonde realized that soon everyone would start whispering about them. The girl asked Wang Shunyu to calm down and insisted that she was nearby. After the host finished his workday, they stood at a vending machine filled with delicious snacks. Handing over a small carton of milk, Hannah remembered that it was the guy's favorite drink. The blonde man asked how the mistress knew what he liked. Wang Shunya knew that people usually assumed hostesses preferred alcohol. The girl explained that it was obvious, as she'd noticed him buying the drink occasionally. Hannah couldn't understand why she could so easily discern Mr. Wang's preferences. The girl couldn't have done something like that in her previous relationship. That day, the brown-haired man reminded her that he had repeatedly said he didn't like liver. The businesswoman hesitantly explained that there was nothing surprising about this. Hannah noticed that the host had been behaving unusually in the workplace. The businesswoman asked if this would affect the guy's other clients. Lifting the blonde man's head, Hannah pierced his soul with her amethyst eyes. The businesswoman asked why he was crying. Wang Shunya explained, tears of happiness streaming down his face. The blonde man understood that whether his parents abandoned him or not, his mistress would always be by his side. The boy explained that knowing this allowed him to talk calmly with his mother. Wang Shunya said he'd learned of some misunderstanding. Hannah, opening a can of soda, asked if his mother had left him. As Hannah finished the can, she noticed that Aunt Jang didn't seem like the type to sell out her son. The blonde man asked if his comments had bothered her. Wang Shunya explained that he had fled of his own free will. Hannah argued that if he wasn't in the best of circumstances, he wasn't obligated to return. She explained that he shouldn't have forced himself. The businesswoman asked if this was a carefully considered decision. Smiling, Hannah explained that her job was to support him no matter what. The girl offered to help him get through any problems together. Hannah explained that her words meant nothing if he didn't want to reunite with his family. The girl reminded her that the blonde man could return at any time. Holding Hannah tightly, the blonde man explained that she shouldn't say that. The mutant explained that she could spoil him. The girl hugged him. Hannah explained that before he found her boring, it was best to leave things as they were. Wang Shunya explained that the lady was anything but boring. The blonde man, squeezing her shoulders tightly, explained that he had no right to say that. The boy, too nervous, couldn't finish right away. Wang Shun knew he shouldn't have acted impulsively. The blonde couldn't understand how he could confess to her so fearlessly after betraying her. Wang Shun's body trembled violently, and Hannah realized he had begun to mutate again. The blonde man didn't know what would happen if he told the girl everything. Holding him tightly, Hannah asked him not to worry. The girl's lungs quickly filled with billowing smoke. The businesswoman realized this had never happened before. Puffs of smoke began to slowly dissipate across the alley. A small boy clung to Hannah's leg. The girl couldn't understand why there were now two mutants. The businesswoman, nervously recoiling, noticed that the boy's mutation was a child. The boy touched the girl's hand and called her Xiaoju. Hannah noticed that they really did look alike. She guessed that Wang Shun had really looked like that as a child. The little mutant quickly ran down the street. His silhouette soon disappeared into the night's gloom. Hannah ran after the boy, explaining that they needed to catch up. The blonde realized he hadn't had this mutation before. The boy insisted it was his childhood form that had been used. Wang Shun panicked, realizing he couldn't synchronize his thoughts with the boy's. Having quickly caught up with the boy, Hannah asked him not to run away. She insisted she hadn't meant to hurt him. Pulling his hand away, the boy, in a trembling voice, announced that Xiaoju had abandoned him. The blonde explained that the girl no longer liked him and she wouldn't love him. Hannah was surprised, as she had been certain the baby was a clone of Mr. Wang. The little boy burst into tears and asked the girl for forgiveness. The boy explained that he was too scared. Approaching his clone, the blonde man gave him a good slap on the back of the head. The businesswoman asked what her friend had done. The blonde man coldly explained that he had only done it because he couldn't control the mutation. The hostess suggested Hannah go home. She realized the guy had done something wrong. That day, a young refugee tried to escape through a burning forest. The blonde man felt guilty for abandoning his friend to danger and simply running away. Van Wu knew that helping the test subject escape was wrong and that his friend would definitely be punished. Turning to face the fire, the blonde decided to go back for her. He realized that despite his previous feelings of weakness, he had an obligation to protect Hannah. Pinning the girl to the floor, Brand asked her why she had done it. Her father mercilessly twisted the little girl's arms. Wang Shun woke from another nightmare. Hannah asked where he didn't hurt. The girl asked the blonde man if he was surprised. Looking down, Wang Wu explained that Xiaoju hated him. The little boy was sure she would surely forget about him. The blonde man asked why the girl had been so kind to him. Confused, the businesswoman explained that she hadn't quite understood what he meant. Hannah explained that the mutation's owner had a lot to do. The girl solicitously asked him to tell her everything. With tears in his eyes, the little one began to utter incoherent sentences. Entering the room, the mutant noticed that his little copy was already awake. The blonde announced that dinner was ready. Sitting at the table with two mutants, Hannah could not understand the oppressive atmosphere that surrounded her. The girl couldn't understand why Mr. Wang couldn't take his eyes off the little replica. Hannah was delighted by the cuteness and resemblance between the two boys. The businesswoman couldn't understand why she was thinking about it again. She knew that one day the blonde man would show up with his true love. The thought that he would terminate her contract made the girl's heart skip a beat. The boys simultaneously added a piece of delicious food to Hannah's plate. The blonde boy sternly asked his little counterpart why he thought he knew what Hannah liked. The boy insisted that meat was delicious. and was the girl's favorite food. Trying to break the oppressive atmosphere, the girl suggested they not fight about it. Hannah didn't understand why the mutants were behaving the way they were. The businesswoman asked the guy to be gentler with his little copy. The girl noted that the little clone was a rather rare mutation that could soon disappear. Taking the girl's hand and piercing her with his amber eyes, the boy asked if he was real. Hugging the mutant close, Hannah explained how glad she was that the boy had appeared beside her. The businesswoman realized that if the boy was a smaller version of the blonde, then he had the mindset of a child. Hannah realized she would have to be more careful with her words from now on. The girl explained that he could sleep next to her. Taking the stuffed dog, the boy explained that he was very sleepy. The blonde man asked the girl to come with him. The businesswoman explained that she was ready too and suggested they go to bed. The blonde man abruptly opened the door and announced that he would also sleep with them. Hannah reminded her guest that she had separate guest rooms. Wang Xunya informed him that if he slept alone, so would his miniature self. The kid asked if his future self liked him. The boy insisted it was a coincidence that he didn't like the guy either. Trying to break up the argument, the girl reminded him that they were the same person. She realized the boy knew what Mr. Wang hadn't wanted to tell her. The little mutation asked her adult self if he had apologized to Xiaoju. Hannah noticed that the boy hadn't been himself lately. Wang Xunya knew he couldn't let the girl know his secrets. The blonde knew he couldn't leave them alone. Grabbing the boy by the neck, the hostess explained that he would be coming with him. Holding the boys tightly to her, Hannah asked them not to quarrel among themselves. The girl, lying between the two mutants, wished them good night. Hannah was glad she had a bed big enough for that. Wang Shun didn't know how he could tell the girl that his little self would soon disappear, and there was no need to worry. The blonde silently asked Hannah to forgive him for lying. All he asked was that the misunderstanding was true. The blonde boy's mother truly knew nothing, while his father was determined to sell the freak. That's when Wang Wu decided to run away from home. That evening, the blonde boy's mother confessed to him that she had been looking for him and eventually found him there. The gray-haired woman claimed that the boy's father had long regretted what he had done. The blonde explained that as soon as she found out the exact address, she came immediately. Her mother claimed she didn't make it in time, and he disappeared without a trace. The woman burst into tears and asked for forgiveness and wished her son well in life. She realized they wouldn't have time to make up for lost time if he didn't want to come back. Wang Xunya coldly inquired about how things were going at the research institute. The woman shared that when they arrived, the test subjects had long since disappeared. The mother explained that her husband had signed a contract he shouldn't have. The woman admitted that they were relying solely on their own strength. The lady noted that she hadn't seen her son in a long time, and he had matured greatly. Trembling all over, the woman slowly extended her hand toward him, explaining that she understood he had been through a very difficult time. With a lightning-fast slap, the blonde man removed his mother's hand. She explained that she had only meant well. As Wang Shun embraced his beloved, he realized the irony of fate. He realized the thought had never crossed his mind. The hostess understood that people's apologies and justifications were utterly ridiculous. Wang Shun understood there was nothing shameful in those words. He knew he was nowhere near Hannah's level, and that irritated him to no end. The blonde still couldn't muster the strength to confess his feelings. Wang Xunya doubted Hannah would forgive him if his little self told her everything. The blonde man was suffering from too many thoughts swirling around in his head. He kissed his beloved tenderly, and the blonde asked her to be patient a little longer. Wang Xunya knew he was only a few steps away from catching up with her. His heart began to pound wildly. The guy felt ashamed that he couldn't restrain himself. The blonde realized he was quite lucky that the businesswoman was sleeping soundly. Covering her with a blanket, the blonde whispered forgiveness and wished her good night. Hannah's cheeks turned bright red after realizing that the blonde man had kissed her. The girl remembered him asking her for forgiveness. Trying to close her mouth, Hannah realized that Mr. Wang loved her too.